KFBK, Sacramento.
KFBK News Time 5:23. First of all, we had more than 3 inches of rain yesterday.
The forecast calls for rain and heavy at times to continue, probably into Friday now.
We've been covering the potential flood for a number of days.
I think the question of most concern to people right here in our area, and that is there any danger for people living along the river now?
The level of the Yuba River had gone down 3 feet. Officials in Marysville were saying things are looking really good.
Water control people, the state flood chief says that there is no major problem right now.
But there was a basic underlying assumption that was wrong, and that was that these existing levees were good.
At 6:06, we got a call. The levee has broken behind PV Ranch and Home.
And I saw this wall of water coming towards us. That was the scariest thing I've ever been through.
No one really knew exactly how high the floodwater would reach.
Seeing the damage from the air, that's an experience that you just never forget.
This levee failure changed everything.
So this is our morgue, where we keep all the old newspapers going back, a long time. Ooh, this one's been opened a bit. February of 1986, the newspaper. Let me see, Monday, February 10. So my name's Chuck Smith. I'm the managing editor of the Appeal Democrat newspaper in Marysville. In 1986, I was a reporter at the Appeal Democrat newspaper. But anyway, for 2 weeks, we were writing stories about the river rising. On February 20, it had stopped raining. I remember one of the editors came by, and he came by and he goes, "Well, any hope for optimism today?" And I said, "Well, I'll ask that question when I call around today." And so I did. That was the question I asked every one of the emergency operations, anybody who had anything to do with all the levee districts, anybody emergency operations center, any reason to feel optimistic. And it was like, well, good weather report. I don't recall the headline exactly, but it was pretty much, officials optimistic.
It says receding rivers and a bright weather forecast have area emergency officials relaxing.
So I just imagined all these people getting the newspaper of the evening and sitting down, reading the paper and saying, officials optimistic, and then hearing the sheriff's department go by, get out, the levee failed.
Now, at the mall, it was a relatively slow day, and so it was later in the afternoon. It was eerily quiet, actually. All of a sudden, an alarm went off that I had never heard before. It was really frightening. I was working at the Payless Shoe Source in the Peachtree Mall, and a guy was running down the hallway in the mall shouting that the levee had just broke. It was a mad dash to the parking lot. Everybody was frantically running, and all I could think about was, is my car gonna start? As I drove around the back of the mall and out North Beale Road, what I didn't know at the time is that water was rushing in from the other side. Once I got home, I turned on the TV, and you could see the pictures of that whole area, including the mall, all underwater. And you could see rooftops, and it was just unbelievable. Only then did I start shaking uncontrollably, realizing what a disaster this was and how devastating it was.
Evacuate the Aldrich area.
I was at the stoplight on North Beale Road when a deputy came skidding across the intersection. And I was like, what's going on? And he said, lady, the levee's broke and here comes the water. And I went to the payphone because we didn't have cell phones back then and called the diner, the restaurant on North Beale Road. And I said, Dad, the levee's broke. The water's coming your way. You got to get out of there now.
People scrambled to leave with whatever they could carry.
Well, I heard the water's coming up pretty fast, so we're supposed to leave, so...
Police and fire departments swept through the towns, rounding up everyone they could find. In areas nearest the river, people were reportedly rescued from rooftops.
That night, they were trying to get a grip on the extent of the flooding. They were pulling people off, a lot of people off of roofs. There were people spent the night on roofs.
The building we're in here at KUBA was built, the first part of it, in the late 1940s. And there was the flood of 55. And that did come out here. And there's a water line about 3.5 feet up from the ground inside that window. So this building that we're sitting in had 3.5 feet of water in it in 55. Back in 1986, we had as many as 6 people answering phones. We had 2 people in the newsroom. We always had 2 people on the air, and that went on for 5 consecutive days.
Here is the 21st article with the aerial image. 24,000 flee as Yuba floodwater spread south. Some residents cling to rooftops. 30 square miles flooded. That nobody drowned was really a miracle.
In 1986, the levee failed just over my shoulder here. Like somebody just come in and cut a slice out of the levee and removed it. They were vertical walls on either side of the break, and water was just flowing through. The levee itself was fine. It wasn't the levee that failed, it was the foundation of the levee that failed at the time. Underneath these levees is the old mining debris from the hydraulic mining that had occurred in the 1800s. And that's a kind of a sandy, silty material. Well, if you know, water goes through sand. It moves quite readily through sand. And that was the basic problem.
And this is West Linda. Most of these images weren't used, but they all tell a story. They certainly do. So this would be some extensive damage. Yeah, these are people wading through water, trying to get home and see what's salvageable. That was the story after the flood, was all the cleanup.
This is the house that my family lived in. We were under 10 feet of water for 14 days. From the outside of the house, the water came all the way up to the tops of the windows. Everything was saturated, so the house had to be gutted out. Every street you'd go down, you couldn't even drive down some streets because the piles of debris. I mean, all we had were the clothes we had on. And I had a baby.
Driving through and just seeing all those piles and piles and piles and piles of belongings. Earl and Helen Miller moved to Linda because Earl worked on New Bullard's Bar. So I had a bunch of girls that used to sing as the Millerines. And music was huge in that family. They were on, local TV or TV up at Chico. And so I went out to their house. I'd known them for years. And they had gotten 14 feet of water to the eaves. Talking to Helen, and she's pointing out to me at the big debris pile out in front of her house, and she's going, "That's my grand piano." So that, I think, is what I remember most, that kind of pain, you know.
It really was devastating, and especially if you were a senior, and we had a lot of seniors in that community, that, you know, their groups, their friends, everybody disappeared, and they gave up.
A lot of times when you read about the history of these types of events, they always describe it in dollar amounts. You know, there was millions of dollars that was destroyed in buildings and economic development. But really what it boils down for me is the personal effects that happened. It's still a little tough to talk about. It's the divorces, it's the bankruptcies, you know, the suicides, it's the depression, it's all the things that happen when something like this happens. Sorry.
The '86 flood was an absolute, impact to the people of Yuba County. I mean, no question. And then 11 years later, we have the '97 flood.
In Yuba County, total devastation. The crumbled levees of the Feather River have changed thousands of lives. Rescue workers patrol from house to house. A routine started during the 1986 floods in this area.
It was very deflating because there'd been some levee work, but there'd been years of agitation for something to be done.
We were at a breaking point here in this community, and people were scared every single winter.
I wanted to get in the car and just leave and never come back.
Now, Linda, along with all the other flood victims in Yuba County, begins the tedious and painful task of cleaning up.
In the soggy aftermath, no shortage of suggestions to keep this from happening again.
My dad suffered a heart attack after that. I mean, 2 floods in 11 years, one that took out his restaurant, and the other one, my parents lived a half a mile from the Feather River, flood in '97. That shortened his lifetime. The other diner, we sold it. To this day, it is still not open.
How could you justify building a building in Yuba County or building a business if you thought, oh, they're going to get flooded again? So I think that made it really difficult to do a lot of development that we had hoped to do.
So the most devastating floods that we've experienced in the Central Valley have actually been on the Feather River system.
This valley has dealt with flooding forever. You know, Marysville is located at the confluence of the Feather River and the Yuba River.
We could probably start all the way back in the beginning during the gold rush era. You have the city of Marysville, the hub of Yuba County.
After the mining debris filled in the rivers, it was a constant fight to be able to keep the water out of Marysville, and hence our levees went taller, taller, and taller.
The levees were largely mined out of the channel itself or from whatever was available at the time. In this region, there are silts and sands that are very permeable, and so what happens when we have water against them for an extended period of time, they become saturated and they start to melt away, just like if you're heating up a cube of butter.
Certainly a Christmas that will never be forgotten by the unfortunate residents of Yuba City and Lower Sutter County.
It was one of the worst flood disasters in the history of the United States.
The creation of the Yuba Water Agency was actually founded in flood risk reduction, right? They suffered catastrophic losses. So that was the catalyst that created the Yuba Water Agency. So flood risk reduction, it's our core mission area.
The 1955 flood was the catalyst for New Bullard's Bar being built.
It started in my life, it started with the '86 flood and seeing those impacts, and then seeing the '97 flood.
Supervisors were told Feather River levees would hold 4 hours and 10 minutes before they failed.
They caused us to identify the true risks of flooding, and they caused us to engineer the levees for a long-term sustainable investment.
I was 5 years old when the levee broke in 1986. seeing like the Peachtree Mall underwater. You know, the J.C. Penney sign was just above the water, and you know that was where Chuck E. Cheese was. And as a kid, you know, that's where we went for birthday parties. And to know that even at that young age, know that was never going to happen again. It was gone. Very formative. It kind of changed who I was.
I was 3 years old when 1986 flood happened, and about 14 when the 1997 flood happened. When I went into college, I realized I really wanted to focus on water, how I could make a difference for my hometown and prevent those issues from ever happening again.
Yuba County was tired of suffering from these catastrophic floods, and so at that time they decided to form the Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority to specifically conquer levee improvements.
I was the founding member of Three Rivers Levee Improvement Authority, and there was a strong leadership. I mean, the board was unified in saying that flood protection was number one.
The Yuba Water Agency was able to secure state and federal funds that were leveraged against local funds to generate upwards of $450 million worth of levee improvements to protect southern Yuba County. Without that, Yuba County would not be where we are at today. Big smiles, everybody.
Because of the dedication and unprecedented efforts of the local citizens and local agencies who have worked so hard for so long to make this project a reality.
The results of reduced flood risk, it'll attract business investment and capital, it'll promote job creation, and we seriously need that here in our community.
The most major improvements have been the Bear River and Feather setback levees, where the levees were actually built further back from the original riverbanks to allow the water to expand over a wider area.
We have worked with the Army Corps to really strengthen the levees around Marysville.
The risk has been reduced substantially. I mean, if you just look at the development in South Yuba County with the addition of all the homes in Plumas Lake, that's not something that could have even been dreamed of prior to this work. All told, I think we're about $600 million has been invested in the local levees.
It is hard to explain to other people how valuable the Yuba Water Agency is and how much it changed the world of Yuba County.
Most people that are new to our community have no idea what has happened in the past. They don't know that the large amount of dirt, engineered dirt, is what's between them and the river. And I remember them coming into this diner and saying, "Are we safe? Are we safe?"
It's a pretty surreal feeling. When I was 12 years old, I witnessed this event from news cameras. But to be here is just a very scary feeling, honestly. And it reassures me that I'm doing the right thing in my position to make sure that these levees are maintained to the highest quality standard possible.
The Paterno suit changed everything from Marysville to Bakersfield. Up until that, the levees are there, we keep them up to date. Basically what the court said, hey, that's not good enough. If you have reason to be aware that the foundations are bad on these levees, you have a duty to repair them. So we've spent literally billions and billions of dollars bringing the levees up to meet current standards.
That very site where the Peachtree Mall once stood is now a Costco, which is, the average American's example of the economic engine is Costco, and it's there now. And we're back to somewhat, normal economy in Yuba County, but it's taken 40 years, which is amazing. But the reality is there's much more to do. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of work yet to do, even though we've had these great accomplishments.
No matter what we do, no matter what investments we make, there will always be a risk.
We want to make sure the people of Yuba County are as prepared as possible for high water and protected as possible from high water.
I feel so safe that I built my brand new home closer to the levee.
The community overall, it's growing, and a large part of that is the confidence in the levees.
It changed the world of Yuba County. We've got the best levees in the state of California.
The future for Yuba County really is bright. We have the right people, we have the infrastructure, we have incredible businesses moving in. Who would have thought a Costco would be here? Every year there's more people wanting to live in this incredible community. Catastrophic events that happen to us speaks to who we are as a community and really speaks to wanting to stay here and understand that this is our home and we are going to do the most we can to protect it.